Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Hartman. I'm Director of Education at Bard on the Beach Shakespeare Festival. I imagine we have a lot of regulars with us once again, but I do just want to say how happy we are to be able to gather even in this unusual way, and to recognize that gathering is a powerful thing. And as we gather here, I want to acknowledge that we at Bard on the Beach are based on the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And Nadeem, do you want to just mention where you're joining us from? And before I tell everybody who you are and how excited we are to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm speaking to you from the land rightfully belonging to the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and Anishinaabe First Nations, now called Toronto.
And we're glad that this unusual way of connecting makes it possible for us to do this with you, because if we were in person, that would not be nearly as easy. I want to just share one bit of housekeeping with you all, and that is if you would like to turn on captions, you may do so. It's at the bottom of your screen. If you click on where it says more, you will see the options for closed captioning, subtitles, which you can turn on or off as you see fit. So I want to tell you all about Nadeem Phillip, who joined Bard in 2017 as a member of the Howard Family Stage Acting Company. That season, he played Valentine in The Two Gentlemen of Verona and the Prince of Morocco in The Merchant of Venice. In 2018, he played Orlando on the main stage in that magnificent production. These have all been magnificent productions, but we're all just excited about As You Like It right now, because it's currently being played in Chicago at Chicago Shakespeare. And in 2019, Nadeem was in the culturally groundbreaking All's Well That Ends Well. Amazing. Nadeem credits the late Canadian Shakespeare coach Ian Watson, who taught centrally at the Stratford Conservatory, as the man who taught him Shakespeare. Nadeem also works as a teaching artist with Bard Education, leading workshops for Bard for Life and Bard in the Classroom. And tonight, he joins us for Speech of the Week. Nadeem, I'm so happy you were able to do this. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm so great. Hello to everyone who's here, and also to those joining on the recorded session.
So Nadeem, you know a little bit about Speech of the Week, and the spirit of it is so aligned with the spirit of Bard Education. Our mission is to inspire community through dynamic, engaging experiences with the language, the characters, and plays of Shakespeare. And it's all about individual interpretation and supporting and nurturing and celebrating everybody's interpretation of Shakespeare. So I want to start with nurturing and celebrating and supporting yours. So tell us, Nadeem, what do you do when you first encounter a Shakespeare speech that you are going to work on for the first time? What is your practice?
I find a YouTube video of the most famous actor who's done the speech, and I do it exactly like them.
All right, now we know that's not true.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
No, that being said, it became starkly clear to me as I was preparing for this that any and all of the tools I'm going to be sharing with you and everyone who's joining in tonight are the tools I use on my best day when I'm blowing 7 different kinds of smoke, and I aspire to use every single one of these on every single piece of text I ever get. Sometimes the time constraints do not allow for the use of absolutely all of these tools. And sometimes, you know, inspiration and impulse really will take me in a direction of like wanting to focus on a few tools in particular. So the way I've kind of, and I will be disseminating what I do is in the structure of like, you know, the way my hero Nadeem would do it.
I love that. Well, and I also wonder if as you start to play around with a speech, does the speech itself kind of take you in different directions? Because different kinds of speeches kind of require different aspects of you or different approaches, or they resonate in different ways.
Totally. You know, I'll caveat any language I use with anything that sounds like, if I say the word, you know, properly, as I was about to, that I use this terminology so loosely. I'm of course always talking about, you know, what applies to me and works best for me. It's going to be so different from one individual to the next, one artist to the next. But when I do this properly, I find that there's at the best of times a very egoless quality. It is not, in fact, my choices that are being infused into my reading or my performance of a Shakespearean speech. I have a duty to that speech to play the words, the meter, the punctuation like sheet music. And if I'm doing that the way a good musician would play a good piece of music, you know, people who are listening to it or watching it might have the experience of like, oh, wow. And there's the illusion of, wow, isn't he great? But we don't necessarily think that about this musicians when a musician is playing a piece of sheet music without making a mistake. You think, oh, wow, what beautiful music. You don't necessarily ascribe it to that musician.
Oh, this is so interesting though, because of course now like so many things are firing in my mind in so many different directions. So I love this metaphor, and I have so much respect for technique. And at the same time, there's this magnificent thing about actors and acting is that you're both, if we're using the music metaphor, you are both the instrument and the musician.
Yes.
And you are unique, right? So yes, you want to embrace all of the technique and everything that, you know, all of those things that it's work. It's really work. And it's craft. Like you spend years honing your craft and developing your technique. But at the heart of all that, it's you. And that's one of the things that I love so much about this art form.
Yes. And you know, as we get into it, I certainly would love to, you know, delineate what, in my opinion, are things that are beyond debate. Like the character is saying this, and that is doing this for moving their story forward. And it's the part we have to all agree on. Like we have to all agree on Romeo loves Juliet. We have to all agree on that. Otherwise, this whole thing does not work. Why he loves her, we don't have to all agree on that. What he loves about her, we don't have to all agree on that. Is it true love, or is it just, what do they call it, puppy love? We don't have to all agree on that, but we do have to agree he loves her. Otherwise, the whole thing doesn't work.
Oh, I love this stuff. Okay, so let's go back though. I want to hear what hero Nadeem's, what are the steps that hero Nadeem might take when approaching a speech?
The first step that hero Nadeem would do is to read the play, because that is where you're going to get the context for what this speech even is. Now, you know, really seasoned actors can know by the page number what page number we're on, generally what the context of this thing is. Depending on what the act structure of it is, they can say, okay, you know, if we're working in a 3-act structure, then we're working with, you know, act 1, we're, you know, establishing this whole world. Act 2, we're going to give you the conflict. Act 3, we're going to resolve it all. So if we're on page 6, we're definitely in act 1. And that means we're just establishing what this world is, who these people are, what makes them tick, what do they want. And so we don't necessarily have to get into what happens to them later. But I say, read the whole play. I'll give you an example. So I just did this workshop at the Soul Pepper Theater in Toronto, a playwright named Aaron Shields, who adapted Paradise Lost, which was going to be one of the main stage shows pre-pandemic, the 2020 season. Aaron Shields wrote a prequel adaptation to King Lear called Queen Goneril. And I was so lucky to work on this piece with her and some really amazing people for a week-long workshop. And I had never read King Lear. And so when they had me audition for the piece, they had me audition with Edmund's first monologue, Bastardy Bass. And so I'm like, okay, I had this audition in 2 days. What my 2 days looks like, I don't have time to sit and read King Lear. I don't have time to sit and read King Lear before this audition. So I have to get my sense of, okay, what's the ballpark of where this character is at the moment when this monologue is spoken. And it was still really lost on me from just reading, synopses and not reading the play in its entirety, that, how it is often played, how Edmund is often played, is kind of like he's conniving, like he's just so conniving, and he is all of the things he describes in that monologue. Like, even if he's not those things at that moment when he says it, he becomes those things later. He says, the world just thinks I'm all these things, so I'm just going to be this. And I played that monologue like someone who has just broken, has tried to maintain a certain kind of face and be good his whole life, and just finally breaks and goes, well, you know what? Okay, I've got to take my brother's land and I've got to play dirty to get it. And this is what I'm going to do because I can't take it anymore. Versus someone who is coming on, and as I later discovered that how it's more often played, that he comes in and all that's already done. He had that moment last week and now he's just coming in to tell us about it.
And why is that interesting for an audience to see the results of something that happened last week, right? It's so much more interesting to watch it right there in the moment.
It is. And depending on who you're working with as a director, to do the version of the speech that it gives all of Edmund's, backstory, or as I would like to say, contextualizes his humanity. I could easily imagine working with a director who would tell me after doing the monologue that way, if you could do the monologue that way, the play would be called Edmund, but the play is called King Lear. So we just need you to pick it up. That has happened. And I know that has happened. I've seen that happen to other actors. So sometimes we don't always get that opportunity. Yeah.
So you read the whole play.
You read the whole play. At best, you read the whole play.
You learn as much as you possibly can about the context that your character is in, and connect with your character's humanity in every way that you can. What else do you do when you're working on the new speech?
The other thing I should say about that is, falling short of reading the whole play, we can read synopses, spark notes. The other two things that people do is the joke that I made at the beginning, or you will actually just go and watch another actor do it. The problem with watching another actor do it, and even reading No Fear Shakespeare, the No Fear Shakespeare translation of it, the issue I have with both of those things is once you get the sense of the No Fear Shakespeare translation, you go, oh, this is what they're saying. Or once you see another actor perform that speech, it is very hard to do anything other than that. You get it in your head and you get some kind of sense. I don't know, there's got to be some kind of right brain, left brain thing going on there. And, you know, it might be your right brain has something to latch onto and replicate, which it would be good at. But that would negate your left brain's impulse even to start creating something for yourself.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Because as soon as you give somebody else that power, if you're just looking at an interpretation rather than the original thing, and I know the original thing is harder, but I don't know, I would be an advocate for, you know, sitting down with someone that you really connect with and figure it out together, ask each other questions, you know, sort of say, well, what might this mean? Does it mean this? Does it mean that? And that's so much more useful than going to something like a Sparks Note or a No Fear Shakespeare for the translation, which is really just one person's idea of what it's about.
Yeah, try to sing a Led Zeppelin song, not singing like Robert Plant. It's hard.
Well, you sang Beatles songs, not sounding like them, and you did it magnificently.
But you know what? I don't know if you or anybody else knew this. I was unfamiliar with most of those songs.
Wow, that's so interesting.
I did not grow up listening to the Beatles. Wow. They were just not in my sphere. My parents weren't big Beatles fans. And I think most people got into the Beatles because, you know, their parents had the CD or the tape or the record. And I was not that kid. So I did not know the words. I flubbed the words to Hey Jude in my first audition. And Lois Anderson like fed me the lyrics.
Oh, she's such a star. I'm sure she'd help anybody out. That's so great. Okay, so back to the speech. So you learn everything you can.
You learn everything you can. Then the next thing I will do is I will totally strip the speech down, and I will remove all of what Ian Watson used to call the qualifiers. Any language that gives a noun or a verb a quality, like an adjective or an adverb. And even the metaphors can come out, like at the point where you can see, oh, this is just another version of what was said earlier, but this is, you know, poetic. I happen to have the first bit of the speech right here. Let me turn my self view back on to make sure this stays in the screen. Is it mirror image? Is it all backwards?
No, I can read it.
Okay, great. Oh, hateful hands. Yeah, so hateful is just describing hands. I would take that out. Oh, that's just an expressive vowel sound. I would take that out too. Totally open for flavor. Hands to tear. Such loving words. I'm going to take out such loving as well. Hands, tear, words. Which is the first little bit of the monologue. Injurious wasps to feed on such sweet honey and kill the bees that yield it with your stings. Okay, wasps. Take all that out. We take all this, all the qualifying language out of all of this. We end up with wasps kill bees. I know that has nothing to do with anything, and that is just a metaphor in relation to hands tear words. And now Julia is saying just like wasps kill bees. So it's just a metaphor. So I'm going to take that out as well. I'll kiss each several paper. Okay. I'll kiss paper. Look, here is written, kind Julia. Here is, look, Julia. Unkind Julia, take out unkind. Keep on doing this until I end up with the entire speech. This is like on those cooking shows when they show you, okay, and now we're gonna let that sit. And here's the bowl that I've had sitting for the last half hour. You do that, I end up with hands tear words. I'll kiss paper. Look, Julia, Julia, I throw thy name against stones. Proteus, name, my bosom shall lodge. I search it, Proteus written. Wind, blow not. Line, name, Proteus, Proteus, Julia, I'll tear. I will not. Will I fold then? Kiss, embrace, contend, do. So, in relation to what I was saying earlier, in regards to like, half the time, you might see something that you're like, oh my God, what an amazing choice that actor made or that director made. That was such a great idea. In this, when you break it down this way, I feel like you end up with the kind of lingo that if someone was pulling you, you just woke up and someone was pulling you onto the set or onto the rehearsal stage and they're like, okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to rip up these words, then you're going to kiss them, then you're going to find the one that say Julia and you're going to throw them away. Then you're going to find the one that say Proteus, you're going to hold it to your bosom. Then you're going to take a Julia one and a Proteus one and you're going to make them kiss. And they're like, okay, great. So that like all the action of the monologue is there and it's there already. Shakespeare wrote that. So you might think like, you say, oh my God, it was the funniest thing. The actor ripped up all the things, but then she made these like paper dolls and she made them like kiss. And it's like, yeah, well, believe it or not, Shakespeare wrote that.
That's so cool. And so with that process of stripping away, you end up kind of with the skeletal structure of the speech.
Yeah.
And then if you can identify that, that gives you a foundation on which to build. Yeah.
Totally. And then when you get to add all that stuff back in, it's like such a treat. It's such a treat.
Because then it seems like you have a sense, like almost an intuitive sense or an experiential sense of what is skeletal, what is muscular, what is decorative, what is active, all of those other things.
And even almost like taking it purely to black and white, but then adding color back in.
Mm.
And this is where you start to get opinions, like all of these words that you then sprinkle back in. We're working with hands tear paper. And then we get to add back in, oh, hateful hands to tear such loving words.
And then you can start to find the antitheses, right? Because then you can find that way of really setting off hateful and loving and hands and words, because those are the things that are being opposed.
And it starts to become very, very clear how the character feels about all this stuff. You get a very, very clear sense of what they like and what they don't like. What's working for them in their world and what is not working for them. And how they feel about the other characters too. And you know what helps, I compared doing these the other day to like doing a Sudoku kind of puzzle. Is it literally sometimes can spit out this is not a creative word, but there's so much room for creativity in this. It can spit out a prescription, which is a very helpful thing to an actor who looks at this and thinks, especially an actor who hasn't really done a lot of Shakespeare, who looks at this and thinks, what the hell am I going to do? How am I going to do this? What choices should I make? It's like, hey, if you analyze the text in this kind of way, you can approach it in a way where all of those choices, Shakespeare made all those choices for you already. Like it can really be a de-stressor if you're that kind of person.
Well, I think anything that helps address the sort of, it's like the reverse of the blank page and how intimidating it is for a writer to just have it's certainly true for me when I have to write something, to have that blank page staring at me, to have a wall of Shakespeare text, sort of staring at me and going, I don't know where to start. Having somewhere to start and somewhere to sort of poke around and play and see how this works and see how that works. And that's how you can discover how it resonates for you as an individual. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your process once you've stripped it all down? What is that process for starting to discover all of those features that you said? You used the word opinions, which I love. How do you start inviting those back in and poking around with those and playing with them?
I mean, what I would say is 9 times out of 10, even just adding them back in, if you've ever had to do any kind of diet where they say, yeah, you have to have no salt for a week. And you're like, what? It's like, yeah, that it's not going to be good for, the medication you're on or this other food you're eating. Like, you got to do no salt. Have you ever done a cleanse? And then you get to add it back in after that week of not having it. It's just like, it's kind of effortless. Like, the joy part is effortless. Like, once you get those other words back, they're so much less intimidating than when they're all there as one. When you take this, like this, I don't know, 50 words, 70 words, I went, okay, what is this person saying? What is Julia saying about what she's actually doing? Like, if we were to break it down to, like, Nadeem, open computer, talk to Mary, like, what is he saying? That we ended up with like 12 words. And so that is like so not intimidating in comparison to 70 Shakespearean words. We've got 12 that are not really Shakespearean, like any words that would be, that people would think is like a Shakespearean word, or like an Old English word, or flowery word, or a word that you don't, just looking at it, that you don't know the definition of. All those words, for the most part, are qualifier words. Those are all coming out for that exercise. Hands tear words. That's what we got from, oh, hateful hands to tear such loving words. So to make a short answer long, adding all those words back in for the 9 times out of 10, getting some kind of flavor, some kind of sensibility to go off of, is pretty fun and effortless. But for that 1 time out of 10 where I'm like, yeah, I'm still not getting any juice off of this, and sometimes the way that would be indicated to me that I still don't have it, like I still don't get it, is, if I'm lucky enough to have someone like you, who I've worked with so many of the speeches, or probably all my big speeches I've worked with you on, bouncing them off you. I'm like, do you get this? Do you understand what I'm saying? Is if you have an audience member who is saying, I still don't understand that one part. I was bred in theater school to believe, if they don't understand, it's because I don't understand. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's because I don't know what I'm talking about. And so that is a really, really juicy piece of feedback to get.
And can you feel the difference for yourself, like when you get it and when you're kind of just doing that vague wash of meaning? Like, can you feel that? Or do you rely on having somebody who's listening say, that's not quite coming out as clear?
I think I rely on someone who's listening. I would like to say that I know, but I have bad instincts. I really the times I'm having the most fun sometimes are the times that, the thing is not like
Oh, interesting.
People aren't getting it. I'm like, what? You don't get it? I'm having so much fun. And the times where a director or a coach forces me into, like, focus on what you're saying. Really focus on what it is you're saying. And I'm like, damn, that's not very fun at all. And they're like, yeah, but I understood you crystal clear.
One of those really interesting things, isn't it, about this craft, this art form of finding that balance between how it resonates for us as
Yeah.
an actor and how it resonates for the audience, and finding that lovely balance between the two, because it can't be all at the mercy of our experience, because then we're not in it and then it won't resonate. Nor can
Yeah.
it be all about us.
And I'm still a young actor, and the more seasoned players know this in a way that, you know, is still settling into my bones, which is, you know, we've all, I think, at some point had these experiences where there is a moment of fusion, where your sense of, you know, feeling like you are in it, you are focused, you do know what you're saying, and it also feels like you're not even there. And you can feel the audience when you meet in some ethereal middle space where we're all just going like, and just waiting for the next word to drop. And if you are lucky enough to have had that experience, if you're unlucky enough to have had that experience as a young actor, as I have, you want every time to feel like that. And unfortunately, every time, especially if you're a young actor, every time is not going to feel like that, because it takes work to get to that place. And you will be lucky if by the time you are, you know, have had a few years to work with these texts and have audiences to do them for, that you can learn what the feedback loop is between, you know, you, Shakespeare's words, other people, and time, and just all of it, all of the variables that are involved, and to be humble enough to yield to all of those variables. And at Bard, the weather.
The weather.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a second about character. So it's so cool that we're looking at a character like Julia right now, and you've just come off exploring a character like Edmund from King Lear. So different. So what's your practice, or do you discover qualities of your character within the language your character uses, or do you mostly focus on context and story and so forth? Like, that's something that's really interesting to me.
You know, and that brings me to probably the next thing I would have talked about anyways, which is meter.
Ooh, let's talk about meter.
Yeah, I get a lot of character information from meter. And one thing for meter is you definitely want to check in with you know, the original text, or at least a former publication of the text, not just the director's cut that you've been given. Because sometimes most directors, especially the directors at Bard, are so thoughtful. Nobody cares about Shakespeare more than them. And so they don't just mess up the meter willy-nilly. But sometimes people accidentally, without realizing or thinking about it, will alter the meter. And they don't know they did it. And it can mess you up. Like, it's very strange. I mean, like, for some reason, I can't memorize this. And then you look one day in a former text that has not, like, an original text that was not cut by that director. And you're like, wait a minute, what are all these other words in here? And you see that the meter is different. And, oh my God, that's way easier to memorize.
It's funny, isn't it, how we kind of just feel it? Like,
Yeah.
I can be a really annoying coach, sideline bystander person, because I will often say, can you check that line? I think you're leaving a word out, or adding a word, or transposing words, because there's something about the feeling of it that isn't right. So what's your practice for exploring meter?
In a very basic and boring way, I will go through the speech, counting out the iambic pentameter. I'll just keep my my 5 fingers and make sure I tap each one twice, going through each line and looking for that ba-ba, 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 ba-ba. Looking for, oh, hateful hands to tear such loving words. Check. Injurious wasps to feed on such sweet honey. This is a weird one. Injurious wasps to feed on such sweet honey. We got 12 syllables, but if you do the thing where you say injurious,
kind of mush them together.
Great, we've taken 1 syllable out of injurious. There's 1 down. The other one's coming on honey. Okay, well, we can't say honey in a way that makes it 1 syllable, but there's a way of turning these all into kind of quarter notes in that meter. Oh, hateful hands to tear such loving words. I would call those are all whole beats or whole notes. But if we go into like half and quarter beats, da 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 da. Injurious wasps to feed on such sweet honey. And honey is kind of flood of like, okay. And so I put this second line in a category of like, well, still maybe could be. Like, I don't rule it out as like, that is for sure not meter, because right after that we have, and kill the bees that yield it with your stings. I'm totally of the belief that in Shakespeare's day, people would say things weird to make it fit in the meter. They wouldn't say it the way we say it today. They would have done that thing with injurious. Injurious. If you've ever been to church, the amount of hymns that are like, there's like an apostrophe in the middle of the word, and they've turned a 4-syllable word into a 2-syllable word. It's like the English language shamelessly does this. So I go, okay, maybe it's one of those. But sometimes you come around to one that is for sure, I'm not going to look for one now, but sometimes you come around to one that is for sure not, like there's no way you're going to fit this into 10, or where the accented syllable needs to be. It's like none of those words are said that way with the emphasis on that syllable. So that's when I get into territory of going, okay, this isn't meter anymore. And usually Shakespeare, correct me if I'm wrong, Shakespeare doesn't just break meter for 1 line. And if he does, he means something important in that line. But a lot of the time when we break meter for a little bit before then coming back to meter.
I have a favorite example of
please.
A line that's way too big to fit in the meter. And it's in Romeo and Juliet. When Romeo says, "It is my lady, oh, it is my love, oh, that she knew she were." That's a 14-beat line. And a lot of modern editors will correct it by having it be, "It is my lady, oh, it is my love." Perfect 10 beats, new line, oh, that she knew she were, just all by itself. But what's interesting is when you break them up, it becomes very reasonable and rational. "It is my lady, oh, it is my love, oh, that she knew she were," instead of, "It is my lady, oh, it is my love, oh, that she knew she were," which is like, ooh, the emotion is just spilling out over the container.
Yeah.
So much more interesting.
And Romeo is, I think, the prime example for, at least that I've come across. I've spent more times, admittedly, looking at the male parts than the female ones. Romeo is definitely one where the meter gets crazy, and it is as crazy as teenage hormones what happens in Romeo's meter. And to me, like, I was working on the Banished speech for an audition. I was getting coaching here in Toronto from a coach named Malie Hutton, and I couldn't, midway through the speech, I was off to such a good start. I started the lawnmower, we were off to the races. And then midway through, I would like, what's the next line? And she's like, "Do you want to just take a second?" I was like, "Yeah, hold on." I'm gonna just like pathetically look at my script and be like, "Yeah, I know that's the word, but why don't I get it?" And she's like, "Do you know what's wrong?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I think at this stage of the speech, like just the meter gets all fucked up. And she's like, because he's all fucked up. And I was like, oh, okay, let me do it again. And then I did it again, and I got the lines. I was able to proceed. I was able to cross the bridge. So, you know, that it was my first, like, really taken to school on, like, you know, what if the meter is the character, or at least, like, there's almost like there's a binary code in there. There's zeros and ones to the meter of, like, okay, now we're doing this, now we're not doing this. And it really takes you through that character's thought process, even at, like, really high levels of getting the words in your body and the punctuation. You do their breathing, like you are breathing like them, and the belief that there is a them, and there is, you know, I don't want to believe that I'm Romeo. It's much more aspirational to believe, like, you know, if I do my best, I can be like Romeo. But to keep someone, you know, over there, because I don't talk like this. I don't talk like this. At least I don't think I talk like this. Some people think I talk like this. But it's always more helpful for me to believe, like, the character is someone else. There's someone else, and I'm going to aspire to perform as them. But I'm not helped by being like, no, it's me.
Alrighty, so we've talked about stripping it down to find the bones, the essence of your thoughts. And we've talked about
sprinkling all the words back in, all the poetry back in, and finding, you know, these are their opinions. And there's also another memorization thing there of, like, when you can't memorize the next word, it's also because you have a different opinion than they have. And I think it's only when you get on board with what their opinion is, will you be able to memorize properly.
Oh, I love that. That's a really great insight. Yeah. And then we also talked about meter, which is also another interesting thing, because that was also when the meter seems to be wrong, it's either telling you that maybe there's a mistake that you need to investigate, or maybe there's something going on with the character that's leading to that disruption.
Yes.
In what's going on metrically, rhythmically. So what else do you explore? What other qualities are you looking for? Features are you
getting real weird is to speak through the whole speech without any vowels.
And what does that illuminate for you?
Another thing also in relation to almost like a meter, you get a sense of if your character is a little more in a flow, or in a staccato, or in chaos, or in something lyrical. You know, if we've got a few sentences with a lot of K's or K sounds, we know they're in a very different state than if we've got a couple sentences with a lot of S's and L's and things that just stretch out a bit more languidly. And then similarly doing the same thing, saying the speech without any of the consonants, only doing the vowel sounds. And this is a key into opening up some emotion. Yeah.
Very cool. We're getting some questions.
Are
you ready to answer questions? So we've been talking about the speech almost entirely in the context of the play. But and this is kind of cheeky of us, but we really believe in this idea that, especially when we're looking at some of the text out of context, and it's really for our own discovery, for our own exploration, to discover how things resonate, that anyone can play anything. So as a man, how do you approach a female role like Julia?
Well, with the same respect and love I would approach anything else. I mean, to be fair, I have not ever been put in the position. I've never been hired to play any of the female Shakespearean roles, and I have not spent like the time on any of the female pieces that I have. Oh, that's not true. There was one year I auditioned I did a callback for Nigel Sean Williams in 2017, where I think I did Queen Margaret.
Ooh.
I mean, how do I approach it? I mean, what I might say is, to whatever degree anybody might buy into that the female characters have any more license to really let the top fly off emotionally in those speeches, I revel in that. And I think, you know, those speeches may even, you know, have some more biting opportunities to do that than a lot of the male speeches.
And I can't help thinking about what you said earlier about Edmund, and about how, you know, it's a pitfall to have your mind made up that a character is a certain way or not before you start working. And I love how you talked about, you know, just really identifying with the character's humanity. And I would say the same thing would be true if we're playing a character who is a different gender than our own, that we do that same thing, that we avoid making up our minds that someone is a certain way because they're a certain gender, and instead just discover what that humanity is and how we connect with it. Even though we might not have everything in common with this character, we certainly have some things in common with just about everyone.
I'm a firm believer in that if we show up as performers or readers reading these speeches, if we show up having decided who the character is, we have made it really boring for any viewer or listener, because it's almost like a way of saying, don't worry about it, guys. I decided who this person is for you. So just watch me do this or listen to me do this because it's really good. Versus being like, here's this human being, you decide who they are, which is way more. Now they have to be actively watching and actively listening, and then they get to be in it too. And that's the most fun of all. That's the most fun place to be as a viewer. That's the most fun place to be as a performer, where you feel, you know, one night they love you, one night they hate you. Like, it's so nice.
Much more collaborative, isn't it?
Yeah.
It kind of really holds and celebrates and kind of explodes in the best possible way that the magic that is live theater, that it isn't anything without an audience. And so, yeah, that we do this together it's pretty cool.
And taking it back to that Edmund speech, you know, if he comes in and he's already like, or any other Shakespearean character, Iago, like if they already come in and they're already like, that's not going to spark any discussion after the show. Whereas if you've got something that is a little more ambiguous, undecided, you didn't decide, but you do the things that they do and you say the things that they say, but you didn't decide whether any of that made them good or bad. Then afterwards, when people are having their ice cream on the walk home, they're like, oh, I loved him. And the other person's like, really? I thought he was a jerk. And they're talking the whole way home. And that's a great thing.
Agreed. So I'm going to encourage folks who are listening live to send your questions into the Q&A. We've got another one for you, Nadeem. Any tips on doing accents in terms of the meter?
In terms of the meter?
I think that's what the question is.
I recently had a very interesting thought around accents. And I saw, in preparation for that workshop, I saw a recorded production of King Lear. To be fair, recorded theater is always different than live theater. My preference is live theater, but I watched the recorded production because I couldn't go. King Lear wasn't playing in my town 2 weeks ago. So I watched a recorded production of King Lear, and everyone in the show had different accents. And I found that intensely distracting and confusing, because they were not their native accents. They were, people were doing like a put on accent. Yeah. So
Okay.
I should say that.
That makes a big difference for me.
Yeah, people were like doing accents. And there's a very interesting thing, because I've seen Shakespeare performed by Americans, and I've seen Shakespeare performed by people in the UK. And people in the UK, there's almost like a loaded dice quality of like, these plays were written in English and you are in England, so you're always going to be playing with, spades that the rest of us are not playing with in the same way. But then between Canadians and Americans, like foundationally what has happened in successful Shakespeare that's happening outside of England is we've made it our own. And there was a belief, I think, at a time that held by some that, well, in order to do Shakespeare or do Shakespeare well, we have to do accents. And, places like Bard on the Beach have really spat in the face of that notion and proved it wrong, and have opened it up to like, no, you do it in the way you talk. And I don't care if you have, the accent from your native country. If you have a thick Russian accent and that's your accent, speak Shakespeare and it'll be one of the best things we've ever heard. So doing accents, I've always thought like, and I have always wanted to do it. And I was lucky enough to do it in the Merchant of Venice in 2017, because I was playing the Prince of Morocco, and it was just like a culturally appropriate thing to attempt to speak like I was from Morocco. And so Alison Matthews and I worked a lot on that. And except in cases where, someone is described as, the characters float in and out of Shakespeare. This guy's French, this person's Italian. And like, it breaks my heart when we have to take a word. We all know this town in Italy is called Milan. We all know that. And a lot of us might know that the Italians call it Milano. But for the to make it scan, it has to be pronounced Milan. And anytime anyone said it that way, I died 1,000 deaths. And it's so sad to me. And like, that's the part that I think, I think we're ready to let that part of Shakespeare go. Like, well, we have to say it that way because it has a scan. It's like, yeah, and the whole world knows it's not said this way. So anyways, again, to make a short answer long, I think accents are costume pieces that can cover up some of the best of what we actually want to be shown.
I love that. And I love the fact that Shakespeare was writing before there was any kind of uniformity in the way we speak. Broadcasting has shared this idea that there's a certain way that we are meant to pronounce everything. No, there isn't. And Shakespeare was writing when there was, I love to imagine Shakespeare surrounded by all kinds of different accents, and that Shakespeare's company spoke with all of their different regional accents, because it never would have occurred to anybody that there was a sort of standard.
Yeah.
So that's just me. We have one more question. How do you balance using gesture against the wisdom of letting the words do the work?
That is a really great question. If I was given free license and was not being edited essentially by a director, I would use gesture when I find it, you know, I have talked mildly about this idea of flow, and, you know, particularly in regards to memorization, of like, you know, when you're swinging it from vine to vine and you're grabbing the next vine and you're letting go of the last one and you're just moving through the thing. And, you know, if the use of gesture or the absence of gesture helps you grab onto that next vine, or gives you an even more powerful swing to the next vine, then all the way. If it's conceptual, if it's an idea, if it's born out of the zone of like, oh, well, wouldn't it be cool if when I said this word, I did this? A lot of the time, when you get there, the practicality of how it helps you swing from one vine to the next is not congruent with the concept of how cool it was going to be. So I think definitely what always has to win is the story. Is the story being told? And one way for us to know that, if we don't have a feedback loop, is, well, am I flowing from one thing to the next in a smooth way, or am I getting stuck? Am I getting stuck in between? Is it feeling like it's stop, start, and I'm going, no, what's the next word? Oh, right, that word. It's like, it's not about the word. It could be you're trying to make something happen that's not there. And it is so sad to let go of those things. I come in all the time with hundreds of those things, and I have to let go of them all in order to get out of the way and let the story happen. So if gesture is one of the things that helps you, go all the way. And there's so much room to play in, like, you know, it might feel at first like the gesture is way up here, but you find the real juice comes from when you just take it to half and then you come off it. Like there's a lot of range of what the volume of the gesture could be too. Gesture is integral to what we do as performers. But again, if you don't have an editor, like when you have a director, they edit your gestures. Like, oh, don't put your hand up as so many things I did. You're like, oh, it looks a little too weird when you do that. Do it a different way, or actually don't do it at all. Like we get our gestures edited all the time. But if you don't have an editor, then your feedback loop is the honesty.
And I love if you can let go of the things that are premeditated and can open yourself up to impulse. There are all kinds of delights that might emerge.
Yeah.
That are 10 times better than the premeditated ones anyway.
1 billion times better than the premeditated ones.
Nadeem, I think we're just about at time.
Wow.
So I want to take a couple of just brief moments to encourage you all, those of you who are attending, please come to the working session on Thursday, and please, oh, please, oh, please, share your version of the speech with us. It brings us such joy to see how you interpret these amazing words and to delight in your work. I also want to let you all know that next month we have Christopher Gaze, who will be our special guest artist, and we'll be looking at Prospero's speech, Our Revels Now Are Ended, which seems like a fitting speech to end the series with. One other thing I want to make sure you all know about is a Shakespeareans. You can go to our webpage, and the brilliant Ava has just put the link into the chat, where you can request a link to see the 60-minute video introduction to Shakespeare. We're really excited about it. You can request a link for free access to that video. All the details are there. I want to thank you, Nadeem. I want to thank Ava and Katie and everyone at Bard on the Beach and all of you for tuning in. Thank you for being part of this community, and thank you for playing and discovering together. Have a great evening. Until
Thank
next
you all
time.
so much. Thank you, especially Mary, for giving me the opportunity to just talk for an hour about this thing I love. Thank you for being here.
Wonderful listening to you, Nadeem. Thank you. And thank you all. Farewell.
Bye, everyone.